The year is 2025, and the most important agreement in modern economic history has quietly expired. If you are not paying attention, you will watch your savings, your salary, and your standard of living erode in real time. For half a century, every barrel of oil sold on the planet was priced in US dollars. That was not just an accounting convenience. It was the invisible engine that powered the American empire. Every nation needed dollars to buy energy, the one resource that makes modern civilization function. And because the world needed dollars, the United States could export paper and import the world. That artificial demand made America the most powerful nation on earth, even as the U.S. hollowed out its manufacturing base and accumulated incomprehensible debt. But that era is now over, and almost no major news outlet has explained what it means. Politicians won't warn you. They can't, because if Americans understood what has already happened, they would realize that the America they grew up in is not just changing. It has already dissolved into something new. The Petrodollar agreement dies in 2025, and when it dies, the dollar's global dominance dies with it. Most people will never see it coming, but wealthy families, sovereign wealth funds, and institutional investors already moved. They are in hard assets: gold, agriculture, real estate, and strategic foreign holdings. They understand what every empire that debased its currency eventually learned. Money is only worth what others believe it is worth, and that belief is fracturing right now. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to 1971. August 15th. President Richard Nixon appears on television and announces that the United States is temporarily closing the gold window. Translation: the dollar, once redeemable in gold at $35 an ounce, would no longer be backed by anything except the government's promise. The Bretton Woods system, the post-World War II architecture that linked global currencies to the dollar and the dollar to gold, collapsed overnight. Nixon and his advisors understood the danger. If the dollar was just paper, why would foreign governments accept it? Why would central banks accumulate it? Why would global trade be denominated in a currency backed by nothing? The answer arrived in 1974. Henry Kissinger, then Secretary of State, traveled to Saudi Arabia. The kingdom was the world's largest oil producer, and the United States controlled the world's most powerful military. Together, they crafted a simple but transformative deal. Saudi Arabia would price all of its oil sales exclusively in US dollars. No yen, no francs, no gold, just dollars. In exchange, the US would provide military protection, sell weapons, and defend the Saudi monarchy from internal and regional threats. But here's the twist. The deal did not stop with Saudi Arabia. Through OPEC, the agreement effectively extended to nearly every major oil-producing nation on Earth: Venezuela, Kuwait, Nigeria, the UAE. All of them. Oil for dollars. Dollars for oil. The petrodollar was born. This was not merely a financial arrangement. It engineered a new world order. If Japan wanted to fuel its factories, it needed dollars. If Germany needed to keep its industry running, it needed dollars. If China wanted to build its economic miracle, it first had to acquire dollars. Every country was forced into America's currency before it could access energy, the lifeblood of modern life. That meant the United States could print money without consequence. It could run enormous trade deficits, wage costly wars, bail out banks, and still maintain global influence because the world needed its currency to function. The mechanism was brilliant and ruthless. The U.S. exported inflation and imported real goods. Europe, Asia, and emerging economies absorbed the cost of America's money printing. Meanwhile, American households enjoyed cheap imports, elevated asset prices, and artificially low borrowing costs. People think the foundation of US power is the military, or Silicon Valley, or Wall Street. They are wrong. The foundation was global currency control. When you control the medium of exchange for global trade, you control the arteries of the world economy. And control of trade is control of power itself. For 50 years, the system held. The dollar reigned as the world's reserve currency, not because it was backed by gold, but because it was backed by oil. Every country held dollars. Every central bank bought us treasuries. The U.S. government could borrow unlimited amounts at interest rates other nations could only dream of. And then something changed that most people never heard about. The agreement had an expiration date. It was not eternal, and we just reached it. In 2023, Saudi Arabia quietly announced it would not renew the Petrodollar agreement. No dramatic speeches, no headlines. Financial insiders understood the implications instantly. Politicians pretended nothing happened, because confidence is the only thing preventing a panic. Once confidence cracks, collapse accelerates. Saudi Arabia is not blind. They saw the writing on the wall. For years, they had been building ties with China, Russia, India, and a broader global south, tired of living under American financial hegemony. In 2023, Riyadh joined the BRICS economic bloc, an alliance designed to challenge the dollar. They began accepting yuan for oil sold to China. They discussed selling oil to India in rupees. They debated pricing barrels in baskets of currencies, or settling in gold as nations once did before. Fiat money dominated world trade. Every move has one purpose: reduce dependence on the dollar. They are not alone. The shift is broad and accelerating. In 2000, roughly 73% of global foreign currency reserves were held in dollars. By 2020, that number was 59%. In 2024, it fell below 55%. In reserve currency terms, that is not a gradual decline. It is a landslide. Central banks are diversifying at the fastest pace since World War II. China has cut its U.S. Treasury holdings by hundreds of billions. Russia dumped nearly all of its reserves after sanctions in 2014 and stockpiled gold. India is settling trade in rupees. Brazil and Argentina bypass the dollar entirely. Even France, supposedly an ally, has reduced its exposure. This is the moment when the myth collapses. The emperor has no clothes. The dollar is not backed by gold or industry. It is backed by belief. The belief that the world needs it. When that belief disappears, the currency becomes something else. Paper. Every nation tries to unload before it loses value. And now it gets personal. This is not a game of geopolitics. It is about your grocery bill, your mortgage, your job, The strength of the dollar has never been about the productivity of American workers. It has never been about the morality of American politics. It was about forced demand created by the petrodollar. When that demand vanishes, the supply of dollars does not. The United States has printed trillions. If the world no longer needs those dollars, they will come home. That is inflation, not the 6% or 8% that politicians pretend to fix, but the kind that destroys middle-class savings in months. For half a century, the world absorbed America's inflation. Others paid for our excess. Now those same countries are selling treasuries, diversifying reserves, and creating new trade corridors. When foreign banks dump us, debt. When global commerce shifts away from the dollar, your savings lose purchasing power. Energy becomes more expensive. Medical supplies become unaffordable. Electronics, autos, fertilizer, pharmaceuticals. Nearly everything imported shoots upward. That is how empires fall. Not with explosions, but with mathematics. A quiet unraveling that the average citizen never sees until it is too late. You are living through that unraveling right now. The petrodollar era is over. What comes next will redefine global power and your place in it. Value evaporates faster than you can spend it. And here's the part that should terrify you. The government can't stop it. The Federal Reserve talks about controlling inflation. But their tools were never designed to handle the collapse of a reserve currency. They can raise interest rates. Yes, but raising rates is like treating a broken leg with a flamethrower. You stop the bleeding, but you burn the entire body. Higher rates freeze credit, crush housing, bankrupt companies, and make the national debt unpayable. They can print more money, but printing accelerates inflation and pushes countries even faster away from the dollar. Every move is a trap. It is checkmate on a chessboard they built themselves, and the people in power know it. That is why they are not talking about it. Because if the public understood what is happening, panic would accelerate the collapse they are desperately trying to slow. So the strategy is simple. Keep everyone calm. Keep everyone distracted. Keep the illusion alive. Let the crisis unfold slowly enough that ordinary citizens never connect the dots until they are standing at an empty ATM asking where their savings went. Meanwhile, the smart money has already moved. If you want to know whether an economic narrative is real, do not listen to speeches. Look at what the richest, most informed actors on earth are doing with their wealth. Billionaires are buying farmland. Bill Gates owns more farmland than any other individual in America. Not because he dreams of being a farmer, but because land produces food. And food has intrinsic value, whether currencies blow up or not. It is the oldest hedge in human history. When empires collapse, people still need to eat. That basic truth outlives every monetary experiment ever tried. Ray Dalio, one of the most successful hedge fund managers alive, has been warning for years that the U.S. is entering the late-stage imperial cycle. Debt, polarization, internal conflict, external rivals, declining trust, eventually currency collapse. His portfolio reflects those warnings. Exposure to gold, exposure to foreign currencies, exposure to Asia. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. Historically, a champion of the U.S. economy and the dollar, began shifting Berkshire Hathaway's holdings into foreign companies and commodities. He did not do that because he suddenly fell in love with Japan or copper mines. He did it because hedging against a weakening dollar is no longer optional. But here's the most important signal. Central banks, the entities that actually steward national wealth, are buying gold at the fastest pace in half a century. Russia, China, India, Turkey, Poland, and others are stockpiling physical gold while reducing dollar reserves. In 2023 alone, central banks purchased more than 1,000 metric tons of gold. They are not followers of conspiracy theories. They are not doomers on YouTube. They are tyrant institutions, preparing for a world where the dollar is just another currency, no longer the axis around which global trade rotates. Even corporations are hedging. Tesla, MicroStrategy, and other firms have allocated portions of their cash reserves to Bitcoin and alternative assets, not because they worship crypto ideology or think memes will save the economy, but because they do not trust the U.S. monetary system in the long term. These are entities accountable to shareholders. They do not gamble. They hedge risk, and they are hedging against the dollar. Meanwhile, your financial advisor still tells you to hold 60% stocks and 40% bonds, all denominated in dollars, all pegged to an obsolete system. They say markets always recover, ignoring that entire civilizations did not. They are not preparing you. They are preparing themselves, and you are the one who loses. So what happens next? The end of the petrodollar is not the final collapse. It is the first domino. Here's the cascade. First, oil-producing nations begin accepting other currencies. That is already happening. Saudi China deals in yuan, India in rupees. That reduces global dollar demand. Second, countries holding massive dollar reserves begin selling. They don't want to be the last bag holder. Russia dumped dollars in 2014. China is doing it slowly, quietly, in the background. Others will follow. When they sell U.S. Treasury bonds, fall in price and interest rates spike. Third, rising interest rates make U.S. government debt mathematically unsustainable. The country already sits around $36 trillion in debt. Interest payments alone approach $1 trillion per year, a number larger than the military budget. If rates rise even modestly, those payments double or triple. Eventually, the government's only option is to print money to pay the interest. That is not fiscal policy. That is a death spiral. Fourth, printing money to pay debt accelerates inflation. Prices rise. Workers demand higher wages. Companies raise prices further, and the spiral accelerates. Fifth, inflation destroys confidence in the currency. People seek alternatives. Gold, crypto, foreign coins, land. It becomes a flight, not a debate. And here's the nightmare scenario the textbooks never warn you about. A currency crisis triggers a debt crisis, which triggers a banking crisis, which triggers a political crisis. This is not one problem. It is systemic failure. When people can't afford food, they riot. When governments can't pay salaries, they collapse. When banks can't fulfill withdrawals, they close and confiscate. The entire social contract, the quiet agreement between citizens and institutions, depends on economic stability. That stability rests on currency confidence. We are watching that confidence break in real time. Look at the symptoms. Food prices up more than 25% since 2020. Rent and housing unattainable for an entire generation. Energy costs surging. Wages flat. Savings rates collapsing. Credit card debt at historic highs. These are not isolated problems. They are signals. They are the first visible cracks in the dam. The dollar is not struggling. The dollar is dying. And everything priced in dollars, assets, wages, homes, food, is reflecting that slow death. Let us zoom out. Every global reserve currency in history failed. The Spanish silver, real dominated the 1600s, gone. The Dutch guilder ruled the 1700s, gone. The British pound reigned in the 1800s and early 1900s, gone. After World War II, Britain was so bankrupt it could not maintain its empire. The pound went from global money to regional currency in a single generation. The dollar has been dominant since 1944. That is 80 years longer than most reserve currencies ever survive. The pattern is always the same. Military overreach, unsustainable debt, currency debasement, loss of confidence. America is not the exception. It is the latest chapter. But here's what makes 2025 different. In every past transition, there was a clear successor. The guilder yielded to the pound. The pound yielded to the dollar. This time, there is no heir. The euro is an administrative Frankenstein of competing nations. China's yuan is controlled by a state that manipulates every lever of its economy. Bitcoin is too volatile, too small, too slow. Gold cannot move at the speed of digital trade. What we are entering is not a handoff. It is a fracture. This is a multipolar currency world. Chaotic, expensive, unstable. Exchange rates thrash like storms. Trade becomes fragmented. Nations demand settlement in their own currencies. Supply chains break apart. Trust evaporates. And transitions like this do not happen slowly. They snap, not over decades, but over months. A moment arrives when the world simply refuses to play the old game. And when that moment comes, most people won't understand what happened. They will only feel the impact in their wallets, in their jobs, and in the world they thought was permanent. Currency crises do not unfold over generations. They accelerate. Once the dam cracks, the water does not trickle. It bursts. Look at recent examples. Venezuela went from stable to hyperinflation in 5 years. Turkey's lira lost more than 80% of its value in a decade. Argentina has collapsed so many times that the population has stopped pretending recovery is permanent. And these are not fringe banana republics. Turkey is a G20 nation with NATO-level geopolitical relevance. And even they could not reverse the death spiral once confidence vanished. America is bigger. Yes, more military power, more credit, more resources. deeper markets. But it also carries more debt, more dependence on imports, and a population psychologically conditioned to endless convenience. When crisis hits here, it won't be a slow grind like 2008. It will be a stampede. Everyone will try to escape dollars at the same time. Corporations, banks, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, retail investors, and there will be far fewer exits than participants. In currency collapse, exit doors shrink, while the crowd grows larger. The government will try to stop it. They won't say collapse. They will use words like stability, safety, national security, temporary emergency measures. They will impose capital controls, making it illegal to move money overseas. They will force retirement accounts to buy treasury debt, a polite phrase for confiscation. They will ban private gold ownership like they did in 1933 under Executive Order 6102, and then they will roll out the digital dollar, a central bank digital currency, the kind of system where every payment is traceable, programmable, reversible. Every transaction becomes a permission, not a right. This is not paranoia. It is historical precedent. Failing systems do not loosen control. They tighten it. They restrict. They seize. They surveil. Not because it solves anything, but because letting people escape the currency is to publicly acknowledge it has failed. And governments never admit failure until it can no longer be hidden. By the time they tell you it is a crisis, your capital is already trapped inside a digital corral, your 401k already cannibalized, your savings already diluted. And they will tell you it is for your protection. So what do? First, understand that normalcy bias will destroy you. The belief that things always go back to normal. That the Federal Reserve has an answer. That a politician will show up and save you. That belief is poison. The math does not work. The debt cannot be repaid. The demographics do not support the entitlement system. The empire model is insolvent. This is not a cyclical recession. It is a structural failure. Second, diversify out of purely dollar-denominated assets. This is not financial advice. It is historical observation. In currency collapses, people survive by holding things that labor, scarcity, or utility protect. Real estate, productive land, commodities, foreign currencies, precious metals, cash-flowing businesses, the assets that matter when paper does not. Third, reduce fragility. People romanticize debt because in high inflation, debtors can win, but only if they survive the transition. Lose your income, you miss payments, your collateral gets seized. The safe position is minimal debt, high flexibility, and skills that transcend borders and software. Portable value you can carry in your mind. Fourth, build networks. When systems fail, communities succeed. Rome did not collapse overnight. It hollowed out, and the people who survived were families, guilds, monasteries, local alliances. When institutions become predators, neighbors become lifelines. The people around you matter more than index funds. Fifth, educate yourself. None of this is hidden. The petrodollar history, the reserve currency cycle, the de-dollarization movement. It is all public record. The data is there. The trend is visible. The warnings have been sounded. Whether you act or ignore determines which side of the collapse you stand on. The petrodollar was never an economic miracle. It was a geopolitical contract enforced by oil, trade, and military power. For half a century, it granted the United States privileges no empire ever had the ability to print wealth and have the world accept it as real, to fund deficits without consequence, to maintain global dominance on borrowed capital and borrowed time. But every empire ends. Currency is the bloodstream of empire, and once poisoned by debt, the organism dies from within. We are not experiencing an unprecedented anomaly. We are witnessing the same pattern that tore down Rome, Spain, Britain. Every great power that debased its currency while believing the party would never end. The script is not new. The actors merely change. The petrodollar dies in 2025. The dollar's unchallenged dominance dies with it. And most Americans will be blindsided because every institution tasked with warning them has chosen instead to keep them asleep. But you see the pattern. You understand the timeline. The question is not whether this happens, but whether you prepare before the window closes. Currency collapse is among the most predictable disasters in economic history. It unfolds the same way every time. Expansion, overextension, debt, debasement, confidence shatters, collapse. The technology changes, the propaganda changes, but the sequence is identical. The Roman denarius, the Spanish real, the French assignat, the German Papiermark, the British pound. Everyone began as trusted money. Everyone died as worthless paper. The dollar is no different. It is not exceptional. It is only next. The people who see this coming will have a chance. The people who ignore it will learn the lesson that millions before them learned in the worst possible way. Fiat money dies. Hard assets survive. And the answers to what comes next are not hidden in speculation about the future. They are carved into the failures of every empire that walked this path before. History does not give you the exact date or the spark that ignites the collapse, but it gives you certainty of the outcome. The dollar's reign is ending, not because of bad luck or rogue nations, but because the system reached mathematical inevitability. The question was never if. It was when. And the moment is here. The petrodollar just cracked. The foundation of the empire just shifted. Everything built on that foundation will shake. Are you ready? Because ready or not, it is already begun. If this opened your eyes, share it. The answers are not hidden in the future. They have been sitting in the past the entire time. I am just showing you where to look.